Okay, back to Thomas Taylor on Aristotle, and we are on the nature of the soul. Let me refresh and see which text this is actually coming from. I think this is still from Thomas Taylor's own introduction to his translation of Aristotle's De Anima. And I think this section was actually pretty good. The different aspects of soul, the location. We discussed the location of icasia, imagination, its relation to sense, and so forth. So we'll just pick up from where we left off. In short, with respect to the soul, some of the ancients say that it is incorporeal, but others that it is a body. And of those who say it is a body, some assert that it is a simple, but others that it is a composite body. And of those who assert that it is a composite, some say that it is composed from conjoined, but others from unconjoined bodies. Interesting. So, what would that mean? Like contiguous versus incontiguous? I would assume atomistic versus continuum theories of matter there. But of those who assert that the soul is a simple body, some indeed say that it is an ethereal, i.e., a celestial body, as Heraclides Ponticus, who was an early member of the Academy. He had the heliocentric theory. Okay. But others say that it is fire, as Heraclitus, since according to him, fire is the principle of all things, and thus the soul is of a fiery nature on account of the facility of its motion. Okay. And fire, of course, being the principle of things generally, uh, and motion being the principle of things generally, the soul being the most motive of things, which gives motion, is most of the nature of that fire. Others, however, say that the soul is aerial, as Anaximenes and some of the Stoics. And so, of course, Anaximenes said all things reduced to air, and so it makes sense that, similar to Heraclitus, the principle of all things would be most visible in soul. But others that it is aqueous, as Thales, again, that makes sense, and Hippo, who was surnamed the atheist. For since they saw that seed is from a moist essence, on this account they thought that water is the principle of things. No one, however, has dared to call the soul earth, on account of the gravity and immobility of this element. These, therefore, are the philosophers who said that the soul is a simple body, since there are only these five simple bodies. And these also alone, among those who said that the soul is a body, are able to assert that it is immortal. Okay, so if we say it's a body, a simple body may be immortal, but a composite body won't be. But but of those who thought that it is a composite body, some assert that it consists of unconnected elements, as Democritus and Leucippus, the atomists, and in short, those who introduce atoms. For they said that the principles of things are atoms and a vacuum. So far it seems like everybody who said there's a principle of things says that same thing is the principle of soul. So that makes sense. Although the Stoics also, I think, said that the principle of things was fire, and so that some of the Stoics said it was air that was the principle of soul would be the one exception to that pattern. Okay, for they said that the principle of things are atoms and a vacuum, and hence the soul is composed from spherical atoms, on account of the facility of its motion. But others said that it consists of connected elements, as Critias, who was one of the 30 tyrants. For he said that the soul is blood, since he asserts that the conceptions of men are the blood that surrounds the heart. Of those, however, who were of opinion that the soul is immortal, some say that it is separable from the body, but others that it is inseparable. And of those who say that it is inseparable, some assert that it is the ratio of the temperament. Um, so those who thought the soul was immortal, some say it's separable, some say it's inseparable. So if the soul is immortal and yet inseparable from the body, that would imply that the only way I can think of to salvage that is that there is the subtlest body, like Proclus says, that always attends the soul. And so then, even then, body will be inseparable, sorry, soul will be inseparable from body generally, but separable from the gross body. So I'm not sure if that's what he is referring to. And of those who say that it is inseparable, some assert that it is the ratio of the temperament, as that if a double or a sesquialter quantity of fire, or fire in any other ratio, is mingled with water, it will produce soul. For that double or sesquialter ratio is the soul. But others assert that the temperament itself is the soul. Others again assert that it is entelechia, but entelechia is the perfection and form of the subject. Ratio, however, differs from temperament, for ratio is surveyed in quantity, such as in the sesquialter, or in the double, and the like, and in short, the definite habitude, according to quantity, of this thing to that, is the ratio of the things mixed. But the temperament is the quality which arises from the mixture of qualities. Thus, for instance, a certain temperament, i.e., the tepid, is produced from the hot and the cold, or a brown color from the white and the black. That's, of course, Aristotle's theory of colors, that all the colors are produced by various ratios of white and black. But entelechia, seemingly kind of emulating Pythagoras there and getting a wrong answer, ironically, considering his antipathy for the Pythagoreans. Or maybe that was feigned and he was a secret Pythagorean. We can always speculate on that. But entelechia, as we have said, is the perfection of the subject, i.e., it is the form which accedes to matter from a certain composition of the elements, as to clay the form of a shell accedes. But of those who assert that the soul is separable, some say that every soul is separable from the body, the rational, the irrational, and the vegetative. And this was the opinion of Numenius, who was deceived by what Plato says in the Phaedrus, that every soul is immortal, though he is there evidently speaking about the human soul. So Taylor does not subscribe to Numenius's position, and Numenius was pretty extreme in that he says even physical habits, like physical patterns, have immortality. So they instantiate, like the logoi of nature, are immortal. I kind of buy into Numenius's view there. If the soul is like a form, there's the realm of forms, there's the realm of souls, there's the realm of physical habitudes and logoi of nature. So I guess I disagree with Thomas Taylor. Others again assert that every soul is inseparable from the body, and is on this account mortal, among whom is Alexander Aphrodisiensis, right? Who endeavors to draw Aristotle to his opinion. The typical opinion is that the universal aspect of us, the typical opinion on Aristotle, like what people will say that Aristotle believed about the immortality of the soul, is that the universal aspect of us, the intellect, is immortal. But that's not particular to us. What is particular to us, the entelechy of our body, is inseparable from the body and is on that account mortal, just like Alexander would say. So, in one sense, we're immortal according to Aristotle, but in a universalistic sense, not a particular sense. I don't know exactly if Thomas Taylor will differ from that, or if he'll say that Aristotle would grant personal immortality. But others assert that the rational soul is separable, but that the irrational and vegetative are inseparable. Of these, however, some assert that both the irrational and vegetative soul are inseparable from this gross body, but others that the vegetative soul alone is inseparable from it, and that the irrational soul is indeed separable from this body. yet is inseparable from a certain pneumatic body, which is the true opinion, and which was also adopted by Plato and Aristotle. Okay. Okay, well, the irrational soul then is inseparable from a certain pneumatic body, which also Aristotle supposedly believes in. So, what Proclus talks about, the soul is always attended by the pneumatic vehicle, and there are various grades of pneumatic vehicle. That's why we have a certain pneumatic body, not just the pneumatic body described by Taylor here, also called the okema. So, I suppose then that Thomas Taylor would say somehow that Aristotle believed in the okema and that the entelechy of that okema will be at least the irrational part of our soul. And so it can be immortal, evidently, but we'll see if that's explained more. It is not, however, proper to acquiesce in the assertions of the ancients unaccompanied with proofs of their truth, but we should procure demonstrations of everything, for these dogmas extend to the whole of our life, to which we may add, as we have before observed, that nothing can be more appropriate to us than the knowledge of ourselves. We shall demonstrate, therefore, that every soul is incorporeal, and that the rational soul alone is separable from all body, and on this account is immortal. That the irrational soul indeed is separable from this gross body, but is inseparable from the pneumatic vehicle, and farther still, that after its egress from this gross body, it remains for a certain time, and that the vegetative soul has its being in this body, and perishes together with it. So 3 grades of immortality. The rational soul, fully immortal, totally separable from body. The irrational soul is separable from the gross, but inseparable from the pneumatic. And it remains for a certain time after the egress from this gross body. So I don't know that the irrational soul, according to Taylor, is immortal absolutely. It seems like he's saying it remains for a certain time, but then Proclus will say that at least one pneumatic vehicle is perpetual. And I kind of want to go back and just review which faculties, which epistemic faculties are part of the irrational soul versus the vegetative soul. So I think sense and imagination were part of the irrational. So I apologize to be having to scroll back looking for it, but I do want to. Anger and desire. Desire is part of the irrational soul. Okay. Just scrolling back up, looking. Right. But of the irrational powers of the soul, some are Gnostic, and others vital and orectic, or relating to desire. And the Gnostic, indeed, are fantasy and sense. So fantasy and sense, then, are in the irrational soul, and they would persist outside of the gross body, supported by the subtle body. These, however, differ from each other, inward versus outward. Fantasy, blah, blah. Again, of the orectic and vital powers, one is anger, the other desire. So anger, desire, sense, imagination. Those things are all part of the irrational soul, and they would be supported by the pneumatic vehicle. But Taylor says they would exist. It remains for a certain time, he says. So let's get the details here. That all the above-mentioned opinions, therefore, which assert that the soul is a body, whether simple or composite, are false, that we may give a confutation of them all in common, is evident from the following arguments. Every body is, according to its own nature, dissipable, and is divisible to infinity. Hence it requires something to connect it. with respect to this something, okay, so body can't connect itself. It needs soul to do that. And so if soul is simply body, then it's, you know, not going to hold itself together, because then it would need a soul of the soul to hold the soul body together, and so on. Hence, it requires something to connect it. With respect to this something, therefore, by which it is connected, since it is either soul or some other power, whether it is a body or incorporeal. If indeed it is a body, there will again be wanting that by which it is connected. So we get a regress, which we can't have. Again, therefore, we may interrogate concerning this connecting something, whether it is a body or incorporeal, and this will be the case to infinity. That regress. Hence, it is necessary that the power which is connective of body should be incorporeal. But soul is connective of animated bodies. Every soul, therefore, is incorporeal. In the treatise on the soul, however, Aristotle, after having in many ways confuted these opinions, adds, quote, "Why do I speak of the other powers, since the last of the Gnostic powers of the soul, sense, is demonstrated to be incorporeal by linear necessities?" Okay. If, therefore, the last power is incorporeal, much more are the superior powers. An a fortiori argument. How, therefore, does he demonstrate this? No body, says he, is capable of receiving contraries at the same time, according to the same part. For the whole finger cannot at one and the same time partake of black and white, nor can it be at the same time, according to the same part, refrigerated and heated. But sense at once apprehends contraries in the same time. Ah, true. Okay. For in reading, it apprehends at once black and white. I mean, if you really wanted to nitpick, you could say that within sense, within the field of sense, the same is true. No one, pixel in the field of sense awareness can receive contraries at the same time. But, it's arguable. Hence it knows that this is first and that second by distinguishing the black letters from the white paper. Yeah, that's treating sense as it's kind of assuming that it's incorporeal, or rather impartible, because sense as a whole contains the black and white on the page, so we're just treating sense as a monolith. Whereas a body, we were saying, well, one part of it can be black, one part of it can be white, but no one and the same part can be both contraries at once. You could sort of argue for the same kind of treatment of sense. So I think another form of argument would be necessary here to justify treating sense as a whole as a monolith. I think it can be done, but I don't think it's what he's giving here. By distinguishing black letters from the white paper, you need to justify the holographic character of the field of sense perception, and that all of the things are mutually defined and interrelated. Which, yeah, you could make a viable case, but it's just, yeah. How, therefore, does the sight apprehend contraries in the same time? Shall we say that it apprehends them? Oh, well, actually, he's going to look at some of these difficulties, so I shouldn't prejudge. Shall we say that it apprehends them according to the same part, or that by one part it apprehends the black, and by another part the white? Yeah, that was my exact contention. If, therefore, it apprehends them according to the same part, it apprehends them impartibly, and is incorporeal. But if by another and another part, it is just as if I perceived one thing, but you another. Just as if you should say, that which I saw is different from that which you saw. For it is necessary that what judges should be one and the same, and that it should also apprehend the objects that are judged according to one and the same. But it is impossible that a body can apply itself in the same time according to the same part to contraries, or in short, to different things. Well, the judging faculty can be superior to sense. If you're saying to judge the difference between things, this is like part of the way there towards that holographic argument that the qualities in sense awareness are interrelated or interdefining. Um, to judge the difference between contraries, we need one and the same faculty of judgment to be conducting it. It can't be as if you judged one and I another, or separate parts of ourselves judged separate sense qualia. So we need one faculty of judgment, but we could simply say that that is superior to sense. Sense itself is diverse and disparate, but uh, the judging faculty at a higher level of the rational soul is, you know, more unitive. Sense, however, in the same time applies itself to white and to black. Hence, it applies itself impartibly, and on this account is incorporeal. Which the argument will work if he drew the connection between sense and judgment explicitly, and I think it's in that explicit connection that you could justify the kind of holographic principle being inherent in sense. So I think it's the right kind of argument, but he's just missing the one connection. For if I apprehended, or if it apprehended the black and white according to another and another part, it would not be able to distinguish the white from the black. For no one distinguishes that which is seen by himself from that which is seen by another. The judging faculty would have to be one and the same to notice the difference, but the sensing faculty could simply be subordinate. He needs to connect explicitly the sensing faculty to the judging faculty. That the fantasy also is incorporeal and impartible is evident from the following arguments. For whence comes it to pass that the supervening types, or impressions, do not obliterate the pre-existing types? Which, if it were a body, would be the case, as is evident in wax, in which the supervening obliterate the presubsisting impressions. So, in imagination, we have a succession of images. When we come up with a new image, it doesn't erase all the previous images. Maybe then and there, in our imagination, it does, but all of them are stored somehow in the fantasy. We retain them, and whereas a body couldn't do that. Of course, if he knew about computers and hard drives and so forth, then maybe he would look at this differently. The vegetative soul also, which is subordinate to sense, and physical reasons themselves, are clearly demonstrated to be impartible, and on this account incorporeal. For in each part of the seed there are the same vegetative reasons, or producing principles, having an impartible subsistence, as there are in the whole seed, viz., the nutritive, the augmentative, and the plastic principles. For as the whole emitted seed, if it is contained in the matrix, produces a perfect animal, thus also, if not the whole but a part is received by the matrix, it will nevertheless generate a perfect animal. If, therefore, the vegetative reasons of the animal were a body, the principles of the head, of the feet, and of all the parts would not be able to exist at the same time in the same part. Now, however, they are in the same part, and therefore they are incorporeal, for that which is impartible is also incorporeal. Yeah, so like stem cells can differentiate, and yet they are corporeal. So I guess he's just not thinking about the possibility. But the point that he's making is that the vegetative soul that gives rise to the body with the nutritive and growing principle, that vegetative soul has to be incorporeal because the seed of the body differentiates itself, and you can't have the diverse seeds of the various parts of the body contained in the one homogeneous material of the seed. He seems to think you would already need those differentiations contained. And maybe he's right in that if it is the case that
You still there?
I think I muted by accident. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Where'd I cut off?
You're just getting into the seed and how it contains that information,
Right.
all the parts.
So he could be right. I guess if you don't have a solution to morphogenesis, how the stem cells differentiate, like if you think it's just DNA that regulates that, well, it's an incomplete answer. The body itself can't tell the cells where to go in space. That information is not there in the DNA. It tells what other body components, what other types of cells can be produced or ought to be produced, but it doesn't say what goes where. So morphogenesis, the formation of the body, isn't regulated by DNA, but you could try to come up with some mechanistic bodily explanation of how the different parts are differentiated from a common seed or stem cell. But we don't necessarily have that answer. Like Michael Levin thinks that the differentiation of parts is regulated by fields that are incorporeal, so to speak, or maybe electromagnetic, or information in those fields about viable body plans. And we're tapping into those fields, which would actually be pretty much this theory of the incorporeal soul as well. So maybe there is a good argument in here somewhere that if the seed is homogeneous and produces diversity, well, that homogeneous seed can't contain all of the various things that it's going to produce without there being an incorporeal element. Because in bodies, you can't have head and foot in the same place, right? But in a field of information, abstract information, you can. You can stack all of the body plan ingredients, diverse body plan ingredients in one homogeneous substance. So it's interesting. This argument may actually work at a certain level. As therefore the nutritive, augmentative, and generative powers are contained in the whole tree, thus also they are contained in the branch and the kernel. Some, however, may perhaps doubt whence monsters originate, whether it is not because the seed is deficient or abounds, and why again, if corn is mutilated, the remaining part no longer germinates. Why also the bark of a tree does not produce a leaf or anything of this kind, though these also are parts of the tree. With respect to monsters, therefore, it must be observed that matter is the cause of these, since to the formation of a perfect animal it is necessary that there should be an aptitude of matter, both according to quantity and according to quality. But the matter of animals is the menses, like the menstrual blood or something. Or what does that mean? What is menses? Well, at one level it means the time of menstruation. The Latin just means month, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what he means here. But the matter of animals is the menses. If therefore this matter is superabundant or deficient, or receives any preternatural quality, then it is the cause of monsters. So, because incorporeal formal principles shouldn't be able to have errors in themselves, I suppose. And so monstrosities have to be up to failures or deficiencies in the matter. And in short, these powers are incorporeal, but have their being in a subject body, and require to their existence a subject commensurate both in quality and quantity. But if, in short, the powers in the whole tree and in the parts are found to be deficient, it is from no other cause than that they are of themselves impartible. So if the powers in the whole tree are deficient, for if they were bodies, they would not exist wholly in the amputated branch, and the tree would be mutilated. Okay, so he's saying, so with respect to monsters, it's a failure of matter. But if the powers of the tree are insufficient, then it's up to the impartibility. So monstrosity, I guess, is like a bad form of the body, but then the powers would be something different. Seems like there's a distinction here. Like one form of failure is up to the matter, and then another form of failure is up to the form. So if the powers of the whole tree are found to be deficient, it's it is from no other cause than that they are of themselves impartible. But that's not the cause of their deficiency, because all formal principles are incorporeal or impartible. For if they were bodies, they would not exist wholly in the amputated branch, and the tree would be mutilated. If, however, someone should observe that it may be said there are bodies of similar parts which pervade through the universe, and that in bodies of similar parts there is the same form in the part as in the whole, as is evident in flesh, since a part of flesh is flesh, and to this we reply that bodies of similar parts could not wholly proceed through the whole of the subject matter, for it is impossible that body should pervade through body. If, therefore, the subordinate psychical powers are incorporeal, much more is the rational power, which is much more excellent. And that the rational power is incorporeal is demonstrated through common arguments, but we shall also speak peculiarly of it as follows. Okay, I actually could not follow whatever he was trying to say here. I'm going to go ahead and skip it because I don't think it is worth lingering on. No body itself knows itself, nor is converted to itself, for neither the hand nor any other part of the body knows itself. But neither do the irrational powers, though they are incorporeal, know themselves, for neither does the sight, nor the hearing, nor in short sense, know itself, nor investigate in what its nature consists, but it is reason which makes them the subject of inquiry. The rational soul, however, itself knows itself. It is itself, therefore, which investigates, and itself which is investigated. It is itself which discovers and itself which is discovered, itself which knows, and itself which is known. It is clearly, therefore, demonstrated to be incorporeal. The powers also which are in the subject body arrive at their acme together with the body, and decay together with it, and such are sense, anger, and desire. So these are the irrational powers, sense, anger, and desire, not the vegetative, but they too develop with the body. Presumably, then, the subtle body is going through a similar developmental cycle, since ultimately they are contingent not on the gross body, but the pneumatic vehicle. On the contrary, the rational soul rises in vigor when the body wastes away. It is not therefore in the body as in a subject. Again, nothing endeavors to destroy the subject of itself, for all things aspire after being. Okay, so nothing wants to destroy its own ground of existence, but the rational soul despises the body, tames it by virtuous labors, and often entirely deserts it. So, because nothing would destroy its own existence intentionally, so suicide, presumably he's saying, like, well, the desire would not truly be self-obliteration, it would be separation from the body is the real condition that's sought. But okay, the rational soul therefore has not its being in the body as in a subject. Thus, then, it is demonstrated that no psychical power is a body. In addition to these things also, it is requisite to demonstrate that rational soul has an essence exempt from all body, but the other souls have their existence in the body. And the irrational soul, indeed, has its existence in the pneumatic vehicle, but the vegetative in this gross body. In order, therefore, that we may demonstrate this, it is necessary to preassume that Aristotle delivers to us a rule in the preface of this treatise, which is adopted in common by all philosophers, both by those who conceive the soul to be mortal and by those who believe it to be immortal. The rule is this: it is necessary, says he, to form a judgment of essences from their energies, since every essence has a coordinate energy. Every essence, therefore, says he, which has no one energy separate from body, is not itself separate. Every essence which has no one energy separate from body is not itself separate. Okay, so if the argument would be if the energies are separable, then the essence can be, but is not necessarily separable. But if no essence, or sorry, if no energy is separable, then the energy, I keep messing it up. If the energy is not separ- if no energy is separable, then the essence is not separable. For if having a separate essence, it has no energy separate from body, when it is separated from body, it will have no object for its energy, so that it will be in vain. If none of its energies are separable, then it won't be able to act independent of body, and then it'll have no power, and that violates Plato's criteria of existence, which is to be affected or affect other things. So, so if there's no separable energy, there is no separable essence. And I think Proclus argues in a stronger way in the Elements of Theology for a separable essence whenever there's a separable energy. So it's not just if like all the energies are separable, but if there's any separable energy, and being separable is superior to being inseparable because it's the power to separate that you have that the other thing doesn't have. Essence being superior to energy will be capable of all that the energies are capable of. So if any energy is separable, the essence is separable. I think that's Proclus's argument. Okay. But neither God nor nature make anything in vain. Neither, therefore, is it possible that a separate essence should have no energy separate from body. Again, another rule is as follows: every essence which has an energy separate from body is also itself necessarily separate from body. Okay, and here's Proclus's argument, I would assume. For if it were not separate, it would happen that the thing caused would be more excellent than the cause. That is exactly Proclus's argument. And that which is subordinate would be better than what is superior, which is absurd. For it is always necessary that the cause should be better than the thing caused, and that what is naturally prior should be superior to that which is posterior. How, therefore, does this take place? We know that all energy is derived from power, and all power is derived from essence. So there's dunamis power, like a faculty. Energy is activity, and that's different from motion kinesis in that energy is always going to be wholly active. It's not like a passive being moved. Okay, so all energy is derived from power, like a faculty. So there's the dunamis of sight, and then the energeiae of sight. Faculty of sight, and then the activity of sight, and then the essence, that is superior to the faculty of sight, the essence that, of the soul itself. And then beneath the activity of sight, there's the second sense, the subordinate sense of dunamis, which is a potency for a particular visual activity. There is a concentrated power, dunamis, faculty, and then there's the particular possible energies. Particular possible things are beneath active things, so they're inferior. So there's four levels here. The essence is the most superior, and then the faculty, dunamis, and then the activity which proceeds from the faculty. And then there's the lower sense of dunamis, which is a potential for particular action. And so that potency is inferior to the actuality, and then the faculty is superior to the actuality because it's not an incomplete potency, an unactualized potential. It is the sum of all powers that can be actualized together, and then the essence is above that power. So essence, power, energy, potency, in that order. Essence, power, energy, potency. Those four. We know that all energy is derived from power, and all power is derived from essence. Energy, therefore, has the third order from essence. Hence, if essence is inseparable from body, but energy is separate, and that which is separate is better than that which is inseparable, energy is better than essence, which is absurd. Viz., the effect is better than the cause, and that which is naturally posterior than that which is naturally prior, which is absurd. It's a reductio ad absurdum argument here. It is impossible, therefore, that an energy which is separate from body should not proceed from an essence which is itself separate. These, then, are Aristotelian rules, the latter of which is useful to the discussion of the rational part. So he's taking like one phrase from Aristotle and saying like, yeah, see, Aristotle had this whole Neoplatonic theory of activity and essence and potency, power. Maybe. These then are Aristotelian rules, the latter of which is useful to the discussion of the rational part, but the former to the discussion of the other parts of the soul. At present, therefore, we shall speak of the rational part. If then no essence, which is inseparable from body, has a separate energy, but we can demonstrate that the rational soul has an energy separate from body, there is every necessity that it also should be separate. When therefore the soul, by a dialectical method of Plato, footnote, see this master science copiously explained in the introduction to and notes on my translation of the Parmenides of Plato. The master science, the dialectical method. It makes me want to read his introduction to the Parmenides. So, when therefore the soul, by the dialectical method of Plato, ascends through well-ordered gradations to being itself, and at length arrives at the ineffable principle of things, it is evident that it has such an energy as this entirely separate from body. And this is also the case when it investigates itself. Okay, so because the activity of soul reaches to the ineffable principle of things through, basically ascending the ladder of beauty or any similar formal principle, because it can do that, so a fortiori the essence can do that. And this is also the case when it investigates itself, for in these energies it does not employ the cooperation of the body, nor does it itself energize about the body, so that such an energy is entirely separate from the body and even from the fantasy itself. For though, as we shall observe from Simplicius, those energies which are conversant with intelligibles according to an external projection, as when the soul by a reasoning process endeavors to prove the existence of these luminous beings, are not without the fantasy, so far as it follows, yet does not cooperate with them, just as a shadow follows a body in the light, Though so far as this is the case, these energies are inseparable from the fantasy, yet the stable energy of the soul, which is contracted into the essential, is perfectly separate, and is not at all moved in conjunction with the motion of any corporeal formed appetite or knowledge. That sentence is awful. That's terrible. This is like not good. So that such an energy is entirely separate from the body, even from the fantasy itself. Let's just go back a little bit. And this is also the case when it investigates itself, for in these energies it does not employ the cooperations of the body, nor does it itself energize about the body. Okay? So that such an energy is entirely separate, and even from the fantasy itself. For, and now he's explaining that, and this sentence is all of this here, which is just, that's not how it should be. I mean, long sentences are fine, but it's like meandering. I don't know what clause is what. Okay, so that such an energy is entirely separate from the body and even from the fantasy itself. For though, as we shall observe from Simplicius, those energies which are conversant with intelligibles, according to an external projection, as when the soul by a reasoning process endeavors to prove the existence of these luminous beings. So when the soul project themselves, so the energies of the soul project themselves to intelligibles according to an external projection, are not without the fantasy. Okay, so when we project the energies of soul to intelligibles, that is not without the fantasy. We do use the imagination attending our projection towards intelligibles, so far as it follows, yet does not cooperate with them, just as a shadow follows a body in the light, though so far as this is the case, these energies are inseparable from the fantasy. Yeah, the sentence is bad. Those energies which are conversant with the intelligibles according to an external projection, as when the soul by a reasoning process endeavors to prove the existence of these luminous beings, are not without the fantasy, so far as it follows, yet does not cooperate with them, just as a shadow follows a body in light, though so far as this is the case, these energies are inseparable from the fantasy. Okay, so the activity of the soul is when it ascends to intelligibles, uses the fantasy. The fantasy attends it, perhaps as a shadow does a body in the light, but it attends it, he admits. Yet, the stable energy of the soul, which is contracted into the essential, so those energies which are closest to the essence of soul, which are therefore most persistent, stable energies, more of the same, less of the other, so it's more similar to essence, is perfectly separate. So the stable energies are perfectly separate and is not at all moved in conjunction with the motion of any corporeal formed appetite or knowledge. So imagination is corporeal formed, it's because irrational soul subsists in body and so is influenced by body. That Gnostic power is partly bodily, but the stable energies of soul, they are not at all moved in conjunction with the motion of any corporeal formed appetite or knowledge. But if the energy is separate, the essence also of the rational soul will be necessarily separate. Okay, so that digression was just to like somehow dismiss the possible objection that even the energies of the soul are tied to imagination, and imagination is tied to the body, as the Platonists admit, and therefore you can't conclude that the rational energies of the soul are separate. I feel like he had an argument with someone at some point, which is why he put this kind of in beforeing that possible objection. If that's the purpose for the comment on the fantasy there, then I don't think he's successful actually, because he just asserts that the stable energy of the soul. He's like, yes, the energies of the soul. Does he qualify it with a adjective? Those energies which are conversant with the intelligibles according to an external projection. Okay, so the externally projected energies, yes, they are attended by imagination, but the imagination is like a shadow associated with them. But the stable energies that aren't projected, that are closer to essence, those are totally separable. And that he just asserts. And he would need to like give an example or demonstrate those stable energies and what he means by them, but maybe he will. And if the essence is separate, there is every necessity that it should also be perpetual. For this, all men acknowledge in common that every essence which is separate from bodies is also perpetual. For consider, if the rational essence, being separate, is not perpetual, but generable and corruptible, before it was generated, it was either capable or not capable of being generated. And if indeed it was not capable, it would not be generated, for that was impossible, for that which is impossible cannot be effected. But if it was capable, it was entirely material, for the capability of some time or other being or not being this particular thing is the province of matter. If, however, the natures which are separate from matter are immaterial, they will not pass from a subsistence in capacity to a subsistence in energy, but will always be in energy. By that same logic, though, he should reach Numenius's conclusion that all levels of the soul are immortal. Again, whatever is corrupted according to two modes. How much further is this going to go? All right, we'll go ahead and just wrap up here, I think. Actually, no, we'll read this one paragraph and then in the next place. Again, whatever is corrupted according to two modes, either by the analysis of bodies into their elements, or by the extinction of the form of incorporeal natures, through the incongruity of the subject in which it has its being, in the same manner as the harmony is destroyed when the chords of a musical instrument are relaxed. Okay. So either by the analysis of bodies into their elements, and by analysis he means the breakdown of bodies into their elements, or by the extinction of the form of incorporeal natures through the incongruity of the subject with its being. So yeah, the body becomes unsuitable to house the incorporeal principle, like the harmony in a musical instrument, or the body itself breaks down. According to neither of these modes, therefore, can the rational soul be corrupted, not after the manner of corporeal natures, for it is incorporeal, nor can it be corrupted after the same manner of things which are incorporeal, indeed, but have their being in a subject body. For it has been demonstrated that it is separate from body, so that if it is demonstrated to be separate from body, it is at the same time demonstrated that it is perpetual, and thus much concerning the rational soul. Okay, so the rational soul, separate from body, immortal, and then next we'll speak of irrational and vegetative souls and their degrees of immortality and their degrees of reliance on their subject matter. So that'll be good. Any comments on the reading today?
Before you'd said we have in this order essence, power, energy. What was the last term? Potence or
Yeah,
potential?
potency or potential.
Okay.
And the distinction between the power and the potential is that the power is the sum of all active abilities. It's what gives rise to the active abilities. The potential is particular energies which have not come to pass yet. So it's an unrealized potential as opposed to a power which is contained together before activity.
Awesome.
And that's from Damascus on the Philebus, I think. Stitch says desire seems like it should be part of the vegetative powers. I think there are different levels of desire. I think he's going to end up, I bet he'll say that there is some kind of desire in the vegetative power as well, because all things seek the good. And so even the vegetative powers are seeking some good, and therefore there is desire. But I think desire, because there's even a cognitive desire to apprehend intelligibles, but that's not like desire strictly speaking. So I think desire, as humans think of it, strictly speaking, is in the irrational soul. It is more of the thumos, of that middle spirited aspect of the soul. When we talk about desire, like poetically, that's the level we're talking about. There is a higher intellectual or cognitive desire, but that's in a sensu lato of desire, and then there's the inferior vegetative desire, which you might call more of an urge or something like that. Or maybe there's a better term for it, like a blind will as opposed to a conscious desire. But then not too conscious, because like if you're super conscious with the desire, then it's more of an abstract curiosity, and we wouldn't generally like characterize. But you can see how it's a continuum. Okay, so we'll come back to this next week. Thanks everybody for